Well, welcome back to the show, guys. It's good to be with you as always. This week, I have an awesome conversation that's been long overdue with a guy you may have heard on some other podcasts, or maybe not, but his name is Kyle Kamp, and he runs a company that he started called Valley to Peak Nutrition, or V2P Nutrition for short. And this is a really cool episode. I've spoken before about my own weight loss journey. I actually show a picture. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see the picture of me when I was obese, literally, and then kind of how I look now. But we talk about weight loss and nutrition as far as weight loss goes, but we also talk about performance nutrition. That is something that a lot of guys also want to know about, especially as it pertains to backcountry hunting or like a heavy, training schedule for backcountry hunting. And it's a really interesting episode, and we even dive into a pretty cool discussion about, there's different philosophies. Some guys bring a bunch of candy and like sweets and stuff back, with them on the mountain. For me, I kind of try to avoid that because for so long I was trying to lose weight, that, the idea of kind of bringing candy with me on one of these hunts just felt weird because I don't eat candy any other time. So why would I bring it with me? But anyway, we have a really good discussion because one of the things he actually recommends, and he's a trained dietitian nutritionist, is for guys to bring stuff like gummy bears, even like Twizzlers, for like a quick energy shot when you're going up the mountains. So I kind of tell him, I'm a skeptic, change my mind, and we had a really cool discussion about that. But we hit a bunch of good topics, and it's a really cool episode. And it's a cliche, but where weight loss really happens and where true body transformation really happens is in your nutrition and your diet and how you're eating, how you're fueling your body. So this is an important episode. Hope you guys get a lot out of it. And also it says in 1 Corinthians 6:19 through 20, do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought with a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. So, we talk a little bit, or ask him a little bit about the spirit-body connection. I'm a firm believer that if you're not treating your body well, that your mental and spiritual health is going to suffer as well, and nutrition plays a huge role in that. And so we're actually commanded to treat our bodies well, and that's kind of part of being living ready, being the best you can be. And so anyway, we get into all that stuff and more. If you have not yet, please leave me a rating or a review on wherever you're listening to this podcast, and go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. There's some cool content over there. Got some gear dumps, gear reviews. My Kodiak film is over there. So yeah, check it out. Search my name, Hunter McWaters, on YouTube, and I would love your subscription on there. So thanks for your support, and we'll see you on the next one. Welcome to the Hunter's Quest podcast. I'm here today with my guest, Kyle from V2P Nutrition. And I think we actually talked a little bit via Messenger. You probably don't even remember. It's probably a couple years ago. But then we reconnected recently. And that was one of the things that I initially kind of noticed about you was you were really willing and open to answer questions just from a random person on Instagram. So anyway, man, it's good to finally connect.
Likewise. Yeah. I appreciate you having me. And I remember vividly. And we started talking about coming on, kind of doing a show together. I think it was back in the fall or October, and
yeah,
you were a busy guy, which is great. Right. I get it. It's the fall, but, anyway, I'm grateful to be here now.
Yeah, man. And actually, I'm even talking about before that. I don't think you remember. This was literally probably 2 years ago, maybe. I was kind of on a weight loss journey. I hadn't even started the podcast yet. And I heard you on somewhere else and had been asking you some questions, and you were really helpful. So thanks for that.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I don't remember that deep of a history. I apologize, but
No, it's good.
If I was helpful, I'm glad.
And so now you started your own podcast as well, correct?
Yeah, it's so it's an infant, but
Yeah.
I love doing it. I mean, so I'm a dietitian by training, and sort of took the formal route with that to begin with, and worked in a hospital for a long time, helped coordinate an outpatient program here in Boise where we live, and have always had this sort of passion for performance nutrition as well, which is what led into this, and maybe we'll dive into that. But about a year, well, not quite a year ago, in June or July, we started this business. So we started Valley to Peak about 4 years ago, really with no intention of it ever becoming what it is. It just kind of started it to be helpful to people. And man, just so humbled and I mean, the indescribable feeling of just humility and gratefulness that I feel to be where I'm at. It continued to grow. I left my job in July to do this full time.
Congrats.
And as the program started to grow, I knew I wanted to do a podcast, because one of the things I love is I just love talking about nutrition.
Yeah.
Especially in today's age where it seems like we have more information than we've ever had, and people are more confused than they've ever been.
Yeah.
Right. So what about, and geez, I'm talking to the pro here. What better way than to have a platform where you can just sit down and have conversations with people about nutrition. A lot of what we do comes from people that follow Valley to Peak. So I get questions, like you were talking about. One of our first interactions was a conversation online. I get those all the time. And I love them. So questions that have stemmed off there, I've kept record of over the years. And so we just go back through and not only highlight the question and provide a basic answer, but for me, it's important to describe and outline, okay, here's the answer, and here's why that answer exists.
Right.
Because I just think, like, when you know the core of the solution, when you know the core of the why, then it's just like, oh, it's not just about getting someone to buy in easier to follow a path. It's just so much easier to pursue something when you know there's fruit at the end of the journey. And anyway, that's a really long way of saying, yes, we started a podcast.
Nice, dude. Well, yeah, I think I heard you a while back, and forgive me, I'm looking at my phone, not because I'm like texting or something. I wanted to show you a picture, and also I have kind of my notes for the podcast on my phone. So if you see me, or people watching see me on my phone, I'm not being rude. I'm just looking at notes or looking for this picture. But anyway, yeah, dude, and definitely I'm not a pro. I've only been going for about a year too, but it is so cool just the connections you can make with people doing this, because you're creating content, but at the same time, I've been able to talk to like some really the biggest names in the industry and just make some really awesome connections. And it's just, it's great. And you talked about, you're really passionate about talking about nutrition, and like, especially with something entrepreneurial, like something like this, if you're just trying to like force something to happen to like make cash or something, like a lot of times people are going to burn out. But if it's something you're really passionate about and like you really care about, and just you would do it even if you weren't getting paid, that's when it's something legit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
And so that's initially when, again, I never really had this like, I'm going to set out to start this thing.
Yeah.
I was on about 4 years ago. I was on a separate podcast called the Huntback Country Podcast.
Oh, yeah.
The XO guys.
I think that's where I heard you, and that used to be like, so that was a huge source of learning for me when I was getting started.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear it. And in the so we recorded the podcast, and then into the weeks of the launch of that podcast, Mark and I, who host that podcast, just kept conversing and sort of decided, I'm just going to get an email address, right? Because if people have questions off of this, I want them to feel confident sending those questions to someone, as opposed to like nutrition expert in their mom's basement at gmail.com. So I bought a domain. I bought a website domain for $12.
Yeah.
And I knew nothing about web development, but I created kind of a landing page and really just wanted this email address. So if people had questions, there was somewhere to send that to.
Yeah.
And then naturally, like, yes, I got a lot of questions, but I also had some people like, man, I'm struggling. Could you help me dial it in a little bit more for me? And
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of is where the business part developed and then just continued to grow. So to your point, yes, when you love what you do, and I do, it's just like I mean, I can't, like, if someone were to tell me to tone it down, I would have a hard time because it's just there. Like, I'm not
Right.
conjuring it up and creating it. And a large part of that came from my own experience, right? And you probably heard that in the podcast of, I'm not one of those guys who grew up in a family of elite level athletes that ate really well.
Mm-hmm.
Found myself at early 20s at 270 pounds. I'm 5'6", lost 140 pounds.
Wow.
And so not just remembering the behavioral part of that journey, like everything that's encompassed in that, but also learning through my own journey, like it is not as hard as everything I've always read, right? Like
Right.
all of the detailed minutia stuff that everyone's always said matters. I didn't do any of that, and I've not struggled,
Yeah.
and I was able to lose my weight, right? And so fast forward, went to school, lo and behold, even school, even science, even the discipline of dietetics says that stuff doesn't matter either,
Mm.
right? And so anyway, I think that's where that passion comes from. Is it's just like I want people to know, because everyone who reaches out has tried. Geez, I mean, if I were to say one thing, that would be an understatement. Usually, multiple things
Right.
in terms of trying to get their nutrition in alignment with what their goals are, and they've all circled back to failing,
Mm.
right? And so that passion is, I want people to know it's not something you're doing. You just don't have that. The plan's not right. It's not
Right.
it's not that something's wrong with you. You've been given a bad set of tools. It'd be
Yeah.
like giving someone the task of building a house and then giving them a ballpoint pen. It's like, well, what
Yeah.
am I going to do with this? Right. You
Right.
got to have the right tools to do the job. So anyway, I
Yeah.
think that's probably where a lot of this stems from.
Yeah. And like you said, it's not easy, but it is simple. I mean, weight loss boils down to burning more than you're putting in. I mean, it's just at the end of the day, that's it. And so I want to dig, and also I like your point about, you know, there's something to be said. I saw this in my own like personal journey, even like my spiritual journey with going to Bible school and stuff like that. But like, school's great, not knocking it, but like, I mean, I think I would much rather listen to someone about nutrition who's been overweight, knows what it's like, knows what it feels like, knows how hard it is to lose a significant amount of weight and keep it off. Again, not difficult in terms of like having to know a lot, but it's simple, but it's not easy. But I just love the fact that you've been there, you've felt that, and I excuse me, I've had my own kind of weight loss journey. I'll show you this picture right now. So people are listening to the podcast. This is your clickbait to go on YouTube and watch. I'm about to show my before and after picture from me. So I was 250 at about 6 feet. And then that's at me at 175. And I'm not quite that lean right now, but
So maybe we should flip the script and say, like, what did you do? What were some things that you did to
yeah. And it's
get that weight off? And I mean, even if you're not at your leanest point, and I think we're going to talk about this
Yes, I do
whenever
wanna
light
dive into
can
that later.
potentially be too light, because I'm not my lowest weight, and that was intentional. But
I do want to dive into that later.
even if you're not at your leanest weight now, you're clearly not the guy on the left,
All
right?
right. Yeah.
So what were some things that you did?
For me, I mean, and I think probably listening to some of your stuff was helpful there too. But a couple things. One was just having the motivation and a goal. So, I just realized one day, like, I feel gross. I feel like a slob. I feel weak. I don't feel like a man. Like, I'm embarrassed to take my shirt off in front of my own wife. This is like something's got to change. Then I had, so that was a start. And then eventually also having a goal of, I got invited to go on a trip to Alaska, a backcountry, backpacking style hunt, and started realizing what that was going to require of me physically and where I needed to be and where I was, and having a positive goal to shoot for. And then like in terms of the nitty gritty stuff, I mean, it really came down to I joined a CrossFit gym, and not saying you have to join a CrossFit gym. I know people are, different sides of the coin there, but for me, the community, the programming, the other people around me kind of encouraging, kind of sparking that competitiveness a little bit, got me going. Because before I'd kind of fallen into a rut of just kind of going in, like, benching a little bit, doing some bicep curls, some tricep stuff, and like maybe jog a mile and go home, you know what I mean? Do the same thing. But having that community, the people around me, and the programming. But then where it really took off, which is, as you know, is when I started tracking every single thing that went in my mouth. And I just got that free app, MyFitnessPal, and I still track some, and I'll go through kind of phases where I'm like, all right, I need to track a little bit, kind of get back on track. But that's where it really started to come off, is when I worked with my CrossFit coach, who's also does nutrition training and coaching and stuff. She kind of helped me figure out the macros on there, but mainly it's just like I've heard you say before, it's just a very simple equation. You got to be burning more than you're putting in your mouth and have that deficit over a long period of time. And so that's basically it.
Yeah, and that tracking piece, I think, often intimidates a lot of people, but something we really drive home. I mean, our program's broken up into 3 phases. The third phase gets rid of that, right? So the idea with tracking isn't that it can't. I mean, some guys love it, right? And you could do it forever if you wanted to, if you're that guy. Most people, though, hate it. I mean, they find it meticulous. They don't picture themselves doing it long term, and that's the beauty. It doesn't have to be.
Right.
But if you were to throw 100 people in a room, and you were to give them all measuring spoons, and give them all boxes of Life cereal, you said, okay, everyone, open up the box of Life cereal, pour what you think is a cup in that bowl that's in front of you. There would be 100 different sizes there.
Yeah.
If we repeated the same thing, and we said, okay, everyone, use your measuring cup, everyone would have the same measurement. So there's value in just knowing those things, and it's not something that needs to be done forever. So yeah, I mean, I love what you said there, and I think one of the most profound things to me is, like, you had something that was intrinsically driving you towards making these changes, and it was worth the investment, right? And like the trip to Alaska, you had your CrossFit people and just that herd mentality, and those things can be pretty profound too. And here's the thing, like the nutrition and the weight end of things, and this isn't just weight loss. Like, some people reach out and they want to gain weight, they want to put on muscle, they want to do these other things. And at the end of the day, it is that simple equation. But the barrier that exists between where people are and where people want to be isn't because we can't do basic math. It's everything else, right? Like, I was talking to someone yesterday, and they were asking me about what I do. I said, honestly, I think about 90% of my job is psychology, not nutrition. Yeah. It's everything else about life and social situations and the inconvenience of planning and prepping and all of those things that make it so hard. And so really what the journey becomes, and this goes kind of back to your comment on CrossFit, it becomes about finding what you like, strategies that are going to work for you, and then implementing those. There, at the end of the day, that one goal does need to be achieved, the calorie piece of things, no matter what the weight goal is. How you get there, there is no right way. There is no wrong way. And so some people may have their own thoughts on CrossFit, but those thoughts really don't matter because they worked for you. Yeah. And that is what matters the most, which is why you've not only had such dramatic success, but clearly managed it and maintained it over the years. I love those points that you made.
Yeah. So was there anything that I kind of didn't hit that maybe on your weight loss journey was important for you, or like anything else just kind of about your, your journey in terms of losing all that weight that was important?
No, I mean, mine was the same, except for my initial sort of ideology behind, okay, I've got to figure something out with my life. I'd been overweight my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And then into my early 20s, I was at 270. I'm only 5'6". So like you could look at me and be like, that's not going to be a good road,
Yeah.
especially early in my 20s. And started going to the doctor regularly, started having things like high blood pressure and some of these other little health things that, I know would have continued to grow had I not
Mm-hmm.
changed. But really the catalyst, and I don't want to make this real dramatic because it wasn't at the time, but one Christmas morning, we'd finished opening gifts with our family. I went back to bed just to lay down for a little bit before the rest of the family came for the big Christmas deal, from the Midwest. So it's full of casseroles and like
Oh yeah.
just bracing myself for the day. And I started having just these really bad chest pains. Now,
Mm.
at that time, I didn't know anything about health. I didn't know, you can have just random chest pains that really are idiopathic. There's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
At the time, I thought chest pains meant something's wrong. So I started just realizing, like, man, I need to change something with my life. And it just started small. Like, I'd still go out to eat, but I would change what I'd ordered.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started exercising regularly. And like you, even when I started tracking my nutrition, and at that time, what was popular was something called Spark People, and it was all web based. There was no like phone, internet access ability to log on the
Mm-hmm.
phone or anything like that at that time. So I would get in every day and log what I ate. And that was really where I started to get such a good understanding of how nutrition worked. And
Yeah.
it was just like the way that my brain is wired is, if I get an answer to something, I want to know why that answer worked that way. And then I want to know, okay, well, why did that answer work that way? And so I would keep asking why about things. Right. And then that drove me, by the time I'd taken my weight off, I was kind of at a crossroads in my own life. Interestingly enough, I just finished Bible school.
Oh, nice.
And I had been dating a girl at the time who had just finished nursing school. I knew, this is a complete rabbit trail, but I'd been
It's okay.
involved in youth ministry, totally burnt out, did not want to go use my credentials with ministry. Knew I had to do something with my life, started exploring what was available at the local university, saw dietetics, went to an academic advisor. She said, you got no science, no math background, you weren't a good student. I would steer you more towards kind of basic health. I said, that's all fair. I'm going to sign up for dietetics and I'm going to go that route. If I start failing classes and see like that road is pointless, then
Mm-hmm.
I'll quit. I'll change, midway, because a lot of those classes lined up. And man, I just basically had no life for many years. I'm not naturally smart. I just invested my life and my time into that and learning it. Passed. That's what moved me to the West. You do kind of an internship residency type program. They
Mm-hmm.
place you out here. So when I came out to Idaho, when they matched me in Idaho, I thought, oh, that sounds miserable, but I'll go, I'll finish it, I'll move back to the Midwest. Came to Idaho, saw the mountains for the first time. I was done, and
Yeah.
been here ever since. And so that was, I didn't grow up hunting, I didn't grow up backpacking, I didn't grow up in relation. I mean, I didn't do anything outdoors growing up. I
Mm.
didn't find that stuff until later, right? And
Wow.
hopefully even just hearing that guy, I know there's a lot of guys that are starting to get interested in hunting but feel this giant barrier because they
Mm-hmm.
didn't have that exposure when they were younger, and it is hard. And I owe a lot of what I do know, which isn't a ton, but a lot of what I do know about Western hunting, to guys who were just so patient with me and taking me with them, teaching me over the last,
Yeah, that's
however
awesome.
many years it's been. And it's still definitely possible. So anyway, long story short of, I think that my route was the same as yours in terms of just tracking nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the most overlooked piece by a lot of people is consistency.
Yes.
I've met a lot of people that are really good about doing a couple of those things with some regularity, but there's so many holes that it doesn't give you the ability to see the wins stack up enough that
Mm-hmm.
leads to something tangible at the end of it, right? And that's what's hard, because in the mind of the person, they think, well, I'm giving all the effort, right? Like I'm trying and nothing's happening. And there's nothing more defeating than feeling like you're giving the effort without seeing the fruit.
Yeah.
And in reality, like when I sit down and I start really putting an eye to things, it's like you are trying, but there's also the thing I love about nutrition is there is no emotion. It's complete fact. It either is there or it's not.
Yeah.
So even though you feel like you're trying, it's not consistent enough to see what you're hoping for. And that's okay if you're okay with what you're getting, but you can't expect this other thing if you didn't invest that work. Right.
Yeah.
And that's a harsh statement, but it's also a truth.
For sure.
And I have those conversations a lot because like the reality is you're going to spend your whole life chasing this thing, never getting it. And it's really not because something's wrong with you. Your metabolism's not broken. You're not in starvation mode, which isn't even a thing. It's just that there's inconsistencies.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, consistency is it, man. I've definitely found that. And, on that note, like you were saying earlier, I mean, life is about trajectory, it's so easy now to kind of want things fast and to happen very fast. But, I liken it to like, the flight path of like a bullet, I mean, if you think about that word trajectory, it's like, over a 10-yard increment, that bullet looks like it's flying completely flat, but it does have an angle. And if you take that out to 500 yards, that seemingly flat trajectory is going to be like 10 inches or something. And so that's why I feel like you can make these small changes. You don't have to, I feel like so many people go way overboard and try to, overhaul their entire life in a week. Whereas if you kind of build in some incremental changes and just kind of start moving that trajectory in the right direction, 10 years from now, you might be at a healthy weight as opposed to being 75 pounds overweight. And stuff like tracking, it's a pain in the butt at first. Then you figure it out and it gets easier. You get used to it. It's not a big deal. You can do it pretty fast. I remember when I first started, I was like, but then it really gets easy. I mean, same with eating good. Like when I started, I was eating fast food all the time. I hated most healthy, quote unquote healthy foods like vegetables and stuff. But like once you kind of like get past like your body craving that stuff, like now I can legitimately say like my favorite food probably in the world right now is sweet potatoes. I used to like hate sweet potatoes. Like I will eat those with everything if I could. Just an example, but like it gets easier. Like you start to crave and feel good and actually want those healthier foods. Same with working out. I mean, like the first couple of weeks, I remember, or first couple of months, I mean, just dragging myself into the gym and just regretting it or dreading it and hating it. Now it's like, I just feel weird if I don't get some kind of movement or workout in a day. So, I just think consistency and trajectory is huge. So is it, I guess I want to kind of talk to you about, I saw a post the other day, you were talking about like how light is too light. And I feel like almost all the nutrition talk, is about, losing weight. Cause honestly, that's what most guys need to do is cut some weight. Like if we're just being honest in America, especially, but, you brought up an interesting point about, and I've felt this before because, for so long, I mean, I was basically in caloric deficit for like 2.5 years and like to get 2 years or something. And, but now it's like, I kind of find myself wanting to shift from like this weight loss mode, which I kind of got used to, into, okay, I want to maintain a good weight, but I want to get stronger. And it can be tough because like you saw that picture of me, I was like at 174. I had basically like a 6-pack, and now I'm about at 180. I would say I'm probably stronger, but like I just don't have that like cut physique, and it's kind of hard because you get used to like seeing yourself looking that way. You're kind of proud of it, and then now look in the mirror, I don't, I can still see my abs, but not that well. And it's like, where's that balance? So I'd love to hear you talk on that a little bit.
Well, I think that, man, there's a lot to unpack there. To maintain the type of physique that most people think they want, you have to do levels of the things required to get there that you probably don't want.
Right.
Meaning you want that physique, but even the physique that you look at and think you want, most, I'm just going to say the word guys and mean it broad to cover
Yeah.
males and females. Most guys, most people don't understand what that person, A, does to get there, and two, what they have to do to stay there, and three, how miserable they are. And I know that because I've worked with them.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel
The
like just jump in real quick, like, these ideals that we're kind of have in our mind and we're shooting for, like, the guy on the billboard or the movie star on TV and they take their shirt off or whatever, like, we don't realize it, but like those people, I'm guess you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but like those people probably were on like a cut cycle for like 3 weeks to get there to pose for that picture for the billboard, or like in to get into that movie. They don't necessarily, and maybe some people do, but I think most people don't, even that have that physique, that like, Greek god looking body, don't walk around all day of their life normally like that. Like they were on a cut cycle to get to that point.
they don't walk around like that, right? So the to get to that level, you have to be at a pretty significant calorie deficit.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if the calorie deficit's minor, if the calorie deficit's really, really big, you're going to experience hunger, right? I mean, it is a survival mechanism, meaning if you're not getting enough energy, the body is sending cues to you to eat, right? So when the deficit is so significant that you're getting into really low levels of body fat and you're getting really, really lean, those cues compound exponentially to the point of where there's even, and this is true of me, and if I can remember to incorporate my own story in this, I will. There's reports of, I mean, people obsessing about food to the point of keeping like a shoebox full of recipes that they want to try once they stop dieting, right? And so that's one
Funny, but it's sad.
On another end, there's a social aspect that exists. Most of those people, they're not going out to eat and they are never deviating from the nutrition plan.
Yeah.
So sustainability and therefore consistency will drop dramatically. You have to eat pretty much only single ingredient foods because that's the only way you can be precise in terms of your tracking. So I think the entire idea behind what you're saying is, if you want to be there, people will often ask, like, well, here's my weight. Do you think we can get there? And I will tell them, we can get anywhere you want. The question really is do you want to suffer to the degree that it's going to take to get you there? And
Yeah.
if you say that, then yes. And something else, and sorry, I just got all sorts of thoughts. When you diet to that level, right? And we're not even talking about diet like someone's really, really overweight trying to lose weight. We're talking about guys that are already maybe relatively lean, but trying to get really, really lean. Calorie deficits, especially that significant, are extremely hard on the body. They cause a significant stress to the body. If you leave a person in that state forever, it will ultimately hurt a lot of the hormones involved with weight loss and just pure metabolic processes. After a person gets to that level, they're doing an intentional diet where they bring calories up, and you can mitigate a lot of the weight loss. You can mitigate a lot of the weight gain that comes with that. But most people are not living there forever, right? So, yeah, a couple of the things that I'm thinking of too, whenever someone comes to our program, so they'll say, well, like, what should my weight be then? And we always take it very fluid. Like, if a person comes and they're at 230 and they say, I want to get to 170, I'll say, why don't we get to 215 and then have a talk and say, how do you feel? Do you want to go lower? Does going lower provide you anything beyond just seeing this lower number on a scale? Does your physical fitness improve? Do you reduce risk of injury? Do your lab markers is there any value in going lower?
Yeah.
Because if not, why are you putting yourself through that strain to see this number on a scale? So we'll have this conversation of, well, they'll always ask, well, what do you think I should weigh? And it's never anything to do with like a BMI. It's the weight that you can do the things that you love to do without risk of injury, and the weight that doesn't cause or perpetuate a chronic disease. anything below that doesn't really guarantee you anything.
Yeah.
So I think that that's part one. The other thing is that when you're setting up a program for yourself, remembering to measure things by variables you can control rather than the outcomes. You could do everything right, but you have no control if that scale moves 5 pounds or 10 pounds or 15 pounds. But instead, you feel like you failed if you don't see that scale move to the degree that you were expecting it to. It'd be better to measure variables. Did you go to the CrossFit gym 3 times? Did you pack your lunch? Did you take jerky and an apple every day this week rather than 3 candy bars? Did you, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Measuring things that you have control over as opposed to outcomes. So, yes, I think, looping it back to your initial question, all of the things that you had said are true. People don't live there. They had normally just finished or are going through some sort of a quote unquote cut to get there. They take the pictures and they immediately visit a buffet. That's true. That is true. That's not even funny. That's the reality.
No, yeah. Like I remember having that kind of realization. I was listening to, have you heard the podcast Mind Pump before?
Oh yeah.
Okay. It's all about like bodybuilding, which is not, I never really got into this for aesthetics, but it's easy. When you're a guy like me who's, for a long time was pretty chubby to a point where I was like actually obese for a while. And then you actually get to the point where it's like, dude, I can see my abs and I have a 6-pack. It's kind of like, whoa, it's kind of sweet. And then you kind of want to like ride that. But then I remember having this like aha moment of like you can't sustain that. Like, it's like you just said, like it can be, and people's bodies are different, but it can be like detrimental to your health. And like when you see dudes that are like just, sub 5% body fat, like just ripped, it's like, yeah, they did that for a specific purpose, for a specific time period to do this photo shoot or shoot this film or whatever. And then they don't like walk around like that every day. So that was kind of an aha moment, but it's kind of almost having to retrain yourself, and which is kind of leads me to my next question is like, I'd love to hear kind of, I'm sure we could get into it really deeply, but, basically bottom line, if you want to lose weight, you got to be in deficit. Now, let's say like me, I'm kind of at a healthy, good weight. I'm in pretty good shape. Now I want to kind of shift my focus to performance nutrition. So what, from a high level, and then maybe we can drill down deeper, like what are those kind of shifts going to look like in my day-to-day?
I think the easiest thing to remember is calories are going to drive your weight no matter what the goal is. Macronutrients, which is where those calories are coming from, are going to be the main driver of performance, right? So the main macronutrients are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And each of those have a role to play, right? So one thing that I love looking at it like is it's like a person owns their own nutrition company. The carbs, the proteins, and the fats are the employees. Mm-hmm. They've all got a job to do within the company. Now, certainly you could take the resources from one department and give it to another, but that department's going to suffer, right? And so it would be better to, as you're setting up this company, set it up in a way that allocates the resources to each department to do the job that the company needs to get done. The main job of carbohydrates is it's providing energy to the muscle cells and the brain. The main job of protein is recovery and repair. The main job of fat is the transport of hormones and the transport of nutrients. So as you're sitting down and you're thinking about performance nutrition, you're likely, number one, going to gear your calorie intake more towards maintenance rather than a deficit to where you're still losing weight. Mm-hmm. So you'd likely bring your calories up some. But this goes back even to the basics that you were talking about earlier. We're not talking about a huge swing where, it's like the bro bulk diet, right? Where you're just pounding everything in sight in the name of gains.
Yeah.
That is a recipe for throwing weight on quick and putting you in a position you don't want to be in. The maintenance, it's going to vary depending on how significant of a deficit you were initially in, But the key takeaway there is it's small swings and increases, maybe only a couple of hundred calories to be in a position of to where now you're in maintenance. And the main idea behind this is when you're providing enough calories in the body to do everything that it needs to do, which again isn't just performance, isn't just training, isn't just hunting in the West, is not just doing those things. It's pumping your heart, it's letting your lungs work, it's causing your brain to work, it's allowing you to walk in and out of work and in the office. We're not talking about extraneous stuff. If you were to lay in bed all day, there still is a calorie requirement that you need to stay alive.
I mean, even if you're working out, like the majority of your calories burned in a day is just operating your body.
The largest chunk of them is that.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about how much does it need to come up, it doesn't need to come up much. But when you shift from a deficit into maintenance, there's now is enough of a provision for everything in the body, plus just a little extra to grow that muscle and push it harder in the gym, right? So that is the main key from that. Now, when you shift towards the performance nutrition piece, and this is kind of part two, you're providing enough carbohydrate to satisfy the type of activity you like. You're providing enough protein to grow and repair the muscle. You do not need giant amounts of protein to grow and repair the muscle. This idea of like a 250-pound guy trying to eat 1 gram for every pound of body weight to grow 250 grams of protein is asinine. You simply don't need that much. Now, you do need some. I mean, so for some people, they're going to fall into this camp of, I need to put more attention to this, right? Like, so what that would look like was, when I worked in the outpatient clinic, this would often be in older folks. They'd have a muffin and a mocha during breakfast. Their lunch would typically be a bag of pretzels and a Diet Coke, and then maybe a snack of like peanut M&Ms in the afternoon. Then they would go home and eat a 62-ounce ribeye and a baked potato with broccoli, right? So no protein except for one giant dose later in the evening.
Yeah.
For that person, it would be a better idea to shift towards distributing that throughout the course of the day and meeting the need. For another guy who's eating, pounding 6 protein drinks a day, trying to drink BCAAs, trying to just all of this extra protein, unnecessary. You're taking resources from somewhere else in your company and providing them to another division, which means your protein division looks strong. Everything else looks completely garbage. So if you don't have any energy to train, but you're eating tons of protein because you're pulling from carbs to give it to protein, you need to give more to carbs.
Yeah.
Right. So at the end of the day, that's really what you're trying to provide, is you're trying to provide enough of what you need to cover each job to achieve whatever the ultimate goal is that you want to achieve.
So, okay. So I know, like, I'm tempted to ask you a bunch of really specific questions about myself, but this is well, yeah. But at the same time,
it's always best to have a case study.
That's true. But at the same time, I do want to keep it somewhat general and applicable for the listener and stuff like that. So I guess it, and I know like the thing with like diet and stuff like that and nutrition is it's so individualized, and it's so it's hard to make blanket statements, right? But is it possible to, kind of boil it down to, not talking about weight loss here, but talking about performance nutrition in terms of prioritizing recovery and fueling for a heavy training load, or let's say like a 10-day grueling backcountry hunt? Are there like some high level concepts, like 2 or 3 concepts, or just kind of rules of thumb, maybe just from a high level, that can help guys kind of fuel better and feel better and recover better?
So like 5 core.
Doesn't have to be 5, but
I mean,
yeah, whatever you got.
Well, so I think
are there some high level concepts that kind of?
I think there's a couple. So number one, you can't accomplish 95 things at once, right? You can't be trying to lose weight on a hunt, plus providing enough energy so you don't tank when you're trying to dive off some canyon after an elk, plus you're trying to optimize your nutrition with a bunch of like high quality you can't do 100 things at one time. Yeah. You have to find a focus and then and then create your nutrition strategy around that. So if you're prioritizing performance, then focus on that. So in that, after you figure out what your main goal is that you want to accomplish, you have to find out what is your energy needs to do that, whether that's on a 10-day hunt or whether that's at home trying to build a larger strategy to accomplish this bigger picture of weight loss, weight gain, whatever. You have to know what you need, and you have to know what your numbers coming in are. Otherwise, it's just a complete guessing game. Once that's accomplished, you have to figure out what type of activity are you going to do and how do you want to distribute those calories, right? So the one thing that we say a lot in our program is, if you know your calories, then that's the most important thing. You have to know, because those have to be geared towards the goals.
Sure.
The distribution of those macros doesn't matter. They're completely to preference unless performance or physiology starts to suffer. There are thresholds that exist both high and low that if the carbs, the fats, or the proteins get above or below a certain mark and either performance or physiology suffers, even if it's to your preference, it's not giving you what you ultimately want. So we have to change something. So it's knowing the calories, dividing those up among the three main groups: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. A non-negotiable portion of those calories need to go to protein, and the rest of it should be to preference, meaning don't get rid of stuff that you love. If you like a higher carb diet, I would be an idiot to tell you you need to eat low carb, because you're very unlikely to be compliant to that, which means you're very unlikely to be consistent with that, which means you're very unlikely to ever see anything happen. And at the end of the day, you don't need to. We know that when we compare diets, if the calories are controlled, a certain portion of those calories are going to protein. The macro distribution, meaning whether it's high carb, low fat, or whether it's low fat, high carb, the rest of the way that those are distributed does not matter. So when you set a person up for eating in a way that they enjoy, they're far more likely to be successful with it. So like we'll tell people when we sit down with them initially, the less this looks like anything new, the more on track we are to the right thing.
Yeah. Nice. So when you go on a backcountry hunt, do you have a specific type of dehydrated food do you like, or do you bring your own, make your own stuff?
Well, I started nerding out into the DIY stuff a couple of years ago. So now
it's just so much work.
Like when you're not though.
Well, okay, let me rephrase it. When you are doing 5 like out of state backcountry trips, trying to film them, 10 days each, and then stay on top of creating content and all that, adding the level of time and planning to do all your own dehydrated food is just, at this point, it's too much for me. If you're doing 1 or 2 a year, okay, yeah, sure, do your own food. But for a guy like me, or other guys maybe who just don't have time or don't have the whatever, is there 1 or 2 brands that are better, or are you sticking away from all that and just saying you got to prioritize making your own?
No. So first, my professional training probably has my mindset around processed foods completely different than everybody else's. Right. So there's this idea that processed food is garbage, and that's not true. Not all processed food is junk food. Now, all junk food is processed, but the flip side of that is not true. So this idea of, a nutritionist saying, not worried about sodium in the backcountry, that's because sodium's the primary electrolyte lost in sweat. And when you're on an early hunt, the more that stuff you can shove in, the better off you're going to be at the end of the day. So I'm not... I'm not about to tell anyone there's anything you can have or you can't have. Right. It's always context. It's always the dose that makes the poison. Those things matter. Yeah. Now,
because just side note, for a reason I don't need to get into for the sake of time, I have cases of Mountain House food. And like, I know some nutrition people are like, "Oh, I never eat Mountain House," no, no,
I do.
no. Okay, because like I don't want to just go buy a bunch of other food. I have all this like free Mountain House, like, and I like the way they taste. Like I don't seem to bother me. So
I'll put it to you like this. So I dehydrate almost all of my own meals. I always buy at least one Mountain House biscuits and gravy, one Mountain House lasagna because I like it.
yeah, okay,
Right. So no, I think so from a high level standpoint, again, carbs, proteins, and fats, your body recognizes numbers, not necessary quality. That's a giant rabbit hole that we should go down. So I'm not saying that quality doesn't matter. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
There is context to this. But at the end of the day, your body is recognizing numbers more than anything else. Meaning, if my DIY stuff matches up with carbs, proteins, and fats to your purchased Mountain House, which many people would go down a rabbit trail saying they would incorrectly say that's an inferior product. If the numbers are the same, both of those are going to fuel me identically. Now, you're going to have a big group of people that say, "Oh, they just don't sit well with me." Okay, then you're exception to the rule and you should do what works for you. But if you got a guy like you who says, "Look, I don't have any problem with them. I love the way they taste, and I've got a box of them," I would tell you, knock yourself out.
cool. So that does lead me to my next question, because you said something interesting, which I feel like, just to be honest, in Western hunting, there's some snobbery going around.
For
Like,
sure.
I only eat, whatever. And so I've fallen into that trap a little bit sometimes. But I'm really glad to hear you say that my Mountain House is okay. But I do have some snobbery in my backcountry diet because, well, maybe it's not snobbery, but like I said, for so long I was on this diet of eating really clean, very health conscious because I was needing to lose weight. And then, I see other guys, who are like chowing down on Snickers and gummy worms and like all this candy and crap. And like, and again, like you said, that might work for them or whatever. For me, it's like, dude, I've been eating clean for a year. Why would I take candy bars into the mountains with me? That doesn't compute. So, and I know you're kind of, one of your things is gummy bears. And so the inner snob, the inner Western hunting snob in me wanted to be like, "Ugh, why is he telling people to eat gummy bears? That's candy." And like, so I'm a skeptic there. I'm going to be honest with you. Changed my mind. What's with the gummy bears?
So that's another, it's just a rabbit hole. There's a lot of different reasons. So one, high level, number one, I'm not eating the way that I eat in the backcountry at home, right? Look at me. I'm in my office right now. I spend, I probably work 10, 11, 12 hours a day sometimes. I spend a lot of it in here. I don't need those things. What am I fueling, right? I'm sitting down. I don't need those things. When you are and I'm just going to use the West as an example because that's where we spend our time, and that was the context of the question you had asked.
Yeah.
When you look at what does the body operate off of from a fuel source whenever intensities get high, like is required in the West, it's a predominant. So first of all, the body functions on a dynamic fuel source. Nobody's just a fat burner. Nobody's just a carb burner. Nobody's any burner. It's dynamic, right? But what is interesting is that as that pendulum of intensity shifts upwards, the body relies more and more and more on carbohydrate to the point of where intensities are about as high as 75, 85% of your total all-out efforts. It's 100% reliant on carbohydrate. Fast forward to gummy bears. When you're hiking, blood is being pulled from the gut, given to the legs because that's what's most active. You don't want a lot of fat. You don't want a lot of fiber. You don't want a lot of protein. You want easy to digest fuel that is delivered to the legs quickly. What better fit than gummy bears? Now, does it have to be that? Not necessarily. There's a lot of other foods out there that are quick to digest and that are low in fat, low in fiber,
Such as?
low in protein. Twizzlers. It's going to be everything that you already said, which brings me to this next point. The body recognizes numbers, not quality. Now, there are subjective feelings, like someone could say, oh, I don't eat, I don't know,
Twizzlers.
whatever. Yeah, I don't eat Twizzlers because they gave me hive once, whatever. But the point is that at the end of the day, the body's not picking up on quality; it's picking up on numbers. So
Yeah.
this emotional attachment that we've got to lists of foods that are good and foods that are bad is all made up,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
They're
are
going to be
there for the snobs out there, or like for me even, like, cuz I'm still like I still would just I don't know. I can't picture whipping out Twizzlers and eating it. Like, it just I don't eat that
why,
stuff.
but
I
why?
don't eat it in my normal life. Like, why would I eat
But
it when I
what's
was
different?
hiking?
What's different between when you're hiking and your normal life?
Well, I get you. But at the same time, are there any quote unquote healthier choices that would do the same thing as like a Twizzler or a gummy bear?
No. Right? So here's a great comparison. Most people, if polled, would say that organic, natural, raw honey is processed different than refined sugar. When and this listen, this is not my subjective thoughts on the subject. This is literally what science says, the way human metabolism works. When you eat any carbohydrate, the body has to break it down into in its most simplest form to be absorbed in you. If it doesn't get absorbed, it's too large and it bypasses. You don't get the calories. Not only would you die because you don't have any fuel, you certainly wouldn't have energy to hike. Three simple sugars is what the body converts those into. Whether you've got your own tree full of honey in your backyard or you're going down to the local grocery store buying refined sugar, the body is converting it into one of those three simple sugars. There is no difference, right? But in our minds, we've read and we've been given literature and culture and we've been, our friends. And keep in mind, most of these people, zero education on the topic or any idea on human metabolism works.
Yeah.
But this is what we take in. Right. So a lot of the messaging that is involved with culture has been given by just people with subjective experiences.
For sure.
What human metabolism says is that whether this is a Twizzlers or whether this is the organic, raw, red licorice rope that you bought from Whole Foods, the body says, look, dude, I don't know where you bought this from. I don't really care. All I'm recognizing is 30 grams of carbohydrate. And so I'm going to get you up this hill.
Okay.
So when I know that, it's hard for me to say, hey, everyone, hey, general population, hey, client, hey, guy coming from the East who's already forked over $5,000 for a guided hunt. You just bought a new rifle. You've got what, $3,000 in cash trying to get your truck out here, plus that freezer that you're running in the back. Well, I'll just spend a couple extra bucks on that licorice rope, even though it does nothing extra than just buying Twizzlers.
Okay.
Right. And when I know that, it's hard for me to indulge in the Western snobbery, as you would say, although I am very sure I would make more friends, but I can't, dude. I just can't say that because it's not true.
Oh, I like it. So, but what I did hear you say was I could do honey if I want to keep my snobbery going.
You could do honey. You could also do white sugar if you wanted. You could do whatever you wanted.
Tablespoon of sugar.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you bring candy bars back with you?
Of course, I bring candy bars back. With
Now,
me.
is that just for like a tasty, extremely calorie dense, easy to digest? Is that why, or you just want to, or what's
all the above for a couple of reasons. So one, I don't just sit around snacking on Snickers at home. So it's like I once weighed 270. I ate a lot of Snickers in my day, right? I like the ability to know, like, I have these sometimes. Second to that is to meet the energy demands of what we do back there. It would be, number one, it would be very challenging with just whole food. Number two, my stomach doesn't do well with just whole food because there's so much fat, there's so much fiber, and there's so much protein. All of those things delay digestion in the gut. And whenever you've got blood not going to the gut, you've got those three things there. Plus you've got a hip belt pack that's cinched around your stomach. It's a recipe for indigestion. So you get a lot of guys complain about, oh man, my stomach is in shambles in the mountains, and they are quick to blame Mountain House. And most of the time I'm like, it's everything else.
Yeah.
It's this combination of things. Number one, that you can't help. You got physical exertion. You don't have any oxygen because you're above altitude. You've got a hip belt. You got a hip belt
Yeah, I
around your
gotcha.
waist,
Yeah.
cinched tight. You've got a bunch of like organic, high fiber oat bars that you're trying to pile in one on top of the other. No wonder you feel terrible. Why don't you switch to having like your own trail mix, which is nothing but raisins, Cheerios, and some almonds? Loosen up the hip belt a little bit and start, trying to process some of this stuff, and those things go away.
Yeah.
And now, listen, I don't want to become known as this guy who doesn't care about quality. Quality does matter, but most of that quality piece is made up in our mind. It does have a place though when you're talking about general nutrition, when a guy does have a set of goals, and we'll use you as an example because you had started down that path. When you've been losing your weight and you were focused on, the word you keep using is clean foods, and you were focused on clean foods, those foods are more satiating. They are more nutrient dense. They are way easier to hit a calorie deficit on. If you try to fill a stomach with 1,500 calories worth of Snickers, that guy's going to be pretty hungry during the day. If you try to do the same thing, 1,500 calories full of nutrient dense whole foods, that dude's going to have no problem hitting that calorie goal. There's
Yeah.
value to quality foods. But this like demonizing of all of these other foods, and I think you said it well, there's like this elitist mentality also is just unjustified. If a guy personally has a subjective problem with those foods, don't take them.
Right.
But you can't cast the net wide and say these are the reason we're all dying just because of a simple sugar molecule. No, it's always the dose that makes the poison. And literally from a metabolic standpoint, most of what you're arguing doesn't process the same way. Does processes the exact same way.
Okay, awesome. Well, I feel better now. Maybe I'll try it out and bring some gummy bears this time. Although I don't personally like gummy bears that much, but I'll find something else. Okay, coming up on the time here. I usually like to keep these things about an hour, but I did want to hit one more thing that I feel like probably you may not have been asked before. But spirituality is kind of one of the themes of the podcast, and you mentioned go to Bible school and stuff, and I think in the West, we're very much way too far on the side of compartmentalizing body, mind, and spirit. Whereas, really in most of Eastern thought and anyway, I believe that our body, mind, and spirit are much more interconnected than most people in the West believe. So that being said, nutrition, we always kind of, link nutrition directly to our physical bodies. And of course, that is the main point there. But I think there's also a lot of correlation between what we eat and how we eat, and not only our mental health, but our spiritual health, how we actually feel, like if we have anxiety or if we feel down or whatever. Do you feel there's a connection between nutrition and mental or spiritual health?
I mean, I certainly agree that those three things are connected in that how you view one is going to view others. And in one, I will share this. One thing that's had a dramatic shift on my life is the realization of how I see myself affects my behavior,
Hmm.
right? So changing the way that I see myself so my behavior aligns with that rather than sulking in my emotions and letting my emotions drive my actions rather than letting what I want to be the driver of my actions has been a dramatic change in me for me. As far as like, and this may not be what you're asking, so I don't want to go down a hole you're not open up a can you're not opening, but I you know I don't I haven't observed there being a direct correlation between certain nutrition components and the reduction of depression, anxiety, etc.
Hmm.
But I do think that if a person feels good about the foods that they're choosing, and it affects their body in a positive way, which isn't even necessarily a change on a scale, but what they're able to go do now, that how can that not affect anxiety, depression, and some of these
Sure.
other things, right? So if you start making positive shifts towards food that you're proud of, that results in you feeling like, you know what, I'm going to go for a hike today because that corresponds with another healthy behavior. You
Mm,
start hiking, your physical performance improves. Now all of a sudden your outlook improves, right? Like, so I do think that decisions have a cascading effect
right.
in that way. If that, I
Yeah.
don't know which one of those two you were kind of talking about, but
No, that's good. But you don't think that there's like um, any type of foods or like diet that might actually directly correlate to feeling bad mentally, or like,
I think
yeah,
excess of anything. I mean, and that is something that comes up all the time in our program. There's nothing good and bad. It's always the dose that kills us.
for sure.
And that is one thing that we struggle with so much here is the dose. I have seen people purchase the most expensive, highest quality ingredients and not and be so much in excess of their need they can't lose weight, and that does affect their outlook.
Yeah.
Likewise, like, and I'm a firm believer of this because, like, what hope does that give the person who can't afford those things, right?
Yeah.
Who can't afford the food that seems like you have to purchase this to be here.
Right.
And in my experience, which this is anecdotal, this isn't research, this is anecdotal. In my experience, when you set a person up with a plan based on where they're at financially and the resources they've got, not just financially, but what they have access to,
Mm-hmm.
and it's controlled for them, and the weight corresponds to what they want, their outlook improves. That affects their anxiety, their depression, etc.
Yeah.
I've
'Cause we've
always
all,
found it to. I've just always found it to be that, man. Like, excess of anything. God, you mean we could really go down a rabbit trail here and even say money. Excess of anything. I have found to be really the one thing that just most people who struggle with some of these things, that's a part of it.
yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, we've all kind of had that moment where, I don't know, you've been eating really well and doing really good, and then, maybe you have a moment of weakness and you crush a whole thing of ice cream and you just kind of feel guilty after. So maybe that's just coming from the excess, not necessarily the ingredients, like you're saying. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, in that scenario, and in that scenario, yes, it's not the dairy or the sugar or the any of these individual things that's driving the weight loss, right? And somebody's listening and saying, "Oh, well, the dopamine centers of the brain light up like it's heroin." It's the excess of those things that cause all of that. If
yeah,
that same guy were to have made another choice and he scooped out a quarter cup, half a cup of that ice cream, does he get the same feelings and the same response? Most of our studies say no, he doesn't. So therefore, what's our conclusion? It's not the single things in that product
right.
that are causing these problems. It's how much of it we eat. And this is the problem with Snickers and Twizzlers and things like that. They're not very filling. They're really, 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 really tasty. So they're easy to overdo. And if someone doesn't have a goal of keeping their weight at bay, there is no reason to press stop. So they keep going and they keep going, they keep going, they keep going. And it's really easy to exceed your calorie limit on those type of foods. And that is where they get a poor reputation and why you could potentially call them quote unquote bad foods. But it's all about context when you have those conversations.
Cool, man. Well, this has been really interesting. This one flew by and I've really enjoyed it. So, but like I said, we got stuff to do. So I think that'll probably do for today. But is there anything else that you just want to say real quick in closing, or, where can people go if they want to hear more of your stuff or even talk to you about coaching and that kind of stuff? Because this conversation will probably spark a lot of questions, and though I am happy to answer questions, I think Kyle would be a much better resource if you're really serious about, taking control of your life, your nutrition, whether that be weight loss or performance nutrition. I know he'd be really happy to help you out. So where can people find you?
Yeah, well, I want to say thank you to you for having me on. I
My
want to
pleasure.
say congratulations to you on the exposure and the success that you've had over the
Oh,
last
thanks, man.
year. It's been
Appreciate it.
cool. You've handled yourself really well, and it makes me excited for you. So I wanted to say congrats to
Thanks,
you
man. I
on that
appreciate
too.
that.
If someone has questions or anything, I'd be more than happy to answer them. So our website, everything is lumped under V2P Nutrition, and the two in that is the number. So it's V2PNutrition.com. That's the Instagram handle. That's the Facebook page. The podcast is the Valley to Peak Nutrition Podcast. So yeah, if you're interested in, if you got a question, if you're interested in coaching, there are so many free resources that we've put out. You can check those out, take advantage of those. Anything you're interested in is likely linked in one of those spots, either the website, the Instagram, Facebook, whatever.
Cool. Cool. Well, thanks again, man. I really appreciate your time, and this has been a cool conversation. So appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks.